Welcome to The Pod, a podcast for women in healthcare leadership, a heartfelt space where women executives in healthcare and their allies unite to support and uplift each other with personal stories that inspire positive change, nurture optimistic mindsets, and celebrate diverse perspectives. I'm your host, Dr. Kristen Woods. The single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place, by George Bernard Shaw. Today on our show, we have an amazing guest who is an expert in communication. In fact, she has recently published on the topic and its impact on the patient experience. Laura Kirk is the Assistant Director of Advanced Practice Providers at UT Southwestern Medical Center in Dallas, Texas, and she serves as the Vice President of External Education for the Academy of Communication in Healthcare. She is a certified patient experience professional and serves on UT Southwestern's Patient Experience Committee and Provider Training Work Group as a subject matter expert. She is certified as a professional coach and the executive sponsor for Advanced Practice Provider Wellbeing. Her academic interests include remediation of communication skills and coaching outcomes for healthcare providers. Laura also maintains an ambulatory otology practice at UT Southwestern. Laura, welcome to the pod.
Thank you, Kristen. It's great to be here.
It's great to have you today, and I'm really excited about our conversation. But first, I'd like the listeners to get a little more introduction to you. So could you share with us how you got started in healthcare?
Sure. It was a little bit circuitous. That involved a journey of reflection and awareness. I actually came at it from the angle of art, oddly. Had been one of those perhaps equally left and right-brained individuals in high school and loved my science classes, loved my art classes, and had the opportunity. I was born and raised in Texas and had the opportunity to oddly come to UT Southwestern at the then art medical illustration department and do an informational interview that my father set up for me. And in talking to a medical illustrator, I realized while I love art, I want that to be a hobby and something that brings life outside of work. And I don't want to be selling my art. I'm a person, and sitting in front of my art materials or computer animated design all day would not fill my cup. And so, reflecting on that, and I decided let's go the medical route. So I was pre-med, and it's another journey of reflection. I shadowed quite a few physicians as part of just getting clinical hours and experience and exposure and especially during college, while I was, plugging away at pre-med track. And I didn't see a life model that I was excited about. I felt like, this is in the late 80s, early 90s. And I felt like, I don't know that I want that number of years of training and that much debt to work hours and be bought into that life. And now, thank goodness, that's not the norm. And I do feel like many people have more choice around their life as a physician. But I was through an injury. My father, again, plays a role. He had a foot injury as a marathon runner and saw a PA when he went to an orthopedic practice. And he said, "You're an educational snob." And so I take this seriously. He said, "You have to check this profession out." This PA completely knew what they were doing and explained everything to me in a way I could understand. And I'm sure that there were a lot of questions. And also set me up with a plan, and I'm getting better, and you've got to check this profession out. And so I did. And I was at UNC in Chapel Hill for undergrad, and the birthplace of the PA profession was at Duke. And so PAs kind of came out of the woodwork once I started looking in that area. And I shadowed and felt like this is so rewarding of a career in healthcare where I get to have a meaningful relationship with my patients, have an investment in, diagnosing, prescribing, and investing in the treatment plan for them. But I get to do it as part of a team, and being a social individual and wanting to have that collaborative work environment. It's a great fit. So there was no looking back. I went to PA school and have practiced clinically for the past 25 years, all in surgical field. Not exactly how I had thought I would end up, but it's been very rewarding and maybe a good fit between my fine motor skills of art, doing the procedures, and also the getting to invest in the time with patients or in the peri-procedural or peri-surgical world.
Oh, that's fascinating. I've yet to meet someone who gone into healthcare through art, through the art door. Are you using art today to complement your practice or your life integration?
Definitely the latter. And I did have the opportunity to serve as a journal editor and did my own, did the piece that was the introductory piece for the particular journal episode or issue, but also did my own illustration for my own clinical review article. And that felt meaningful. Otherwise, I would say it's more just for my own well-being. I'm back in studio art for the last 5 months or so after a long hiatus, and that's been really life-giving.
Oh, that is really amazing. And so you've had this very successful career as an advanced practice provider. How did your journey take you into leadership?
That was a little bit more convincing. And I'm grateful that someone who I reported to and consider a mentor, a nurse leader and clinic manager, really saw the leadership skills that as I look back, I had been utilizing throughout, from high school and college and on. I was always invested in leading and tend to be a lot of inspiring or influencing strengths. But this clinic manager said, Laura, you are more than just a mentor to the APPs we're hiring into the department. You were the first, and you're not just training them clinically. You really are a leader, and I want you to be in a formal leadership role. And I, really was nervous about that for a few reasons, but I was convinced ultimately, and it has been incredibly rewarding to do both and to still do direct patient care, which I do to this day, and have a voice of advocacy, a voice of translation of the higher levels of leadership to those in just direct patient care, and to help bring system change. And I'm grateful that I get to wear both sets of shoes still.
And so did that happen before or after your role with the Academy of Communication in Healthcare?
Oh, that's an insightful question. It was simultaneous. I think I might have been asked to consider stepping into the formal leadership role as a supervisor of APPs in the department right around the same time that I first attended an ACH workshop at my home institution. I was at University of California, San Francisco at the time, and they had just brought the foundational relationship-centered communication workshop to the organization. And I remember sitting in it thinking, oh, wow, these skills are clearly evidence-based. I've been doing many of them intuitively, but not all of them. And this is going to make all the difference in my direct patient care. And it did. And I will say that as I started integrating those same skills, as I met with my newly growing and forming group of direct reports, or meeting up hierarchy of leaders or with collaborators, skills worked. And I think that they have actually, those sets of communication skills have changed me more as a leader than in any other way. Certainly as a human generally too, but it was simultaneous, I think, Kristen.
Oh, that's so fascinating. And earlier you said part of your journey into healthcare was recognizing that you're a social person and you needed that connection. I can't remember if it was you or another person at the ACH that said they found a professional home for people in healthcare that value human interaction and relationships when they joined the ACH. And I found that a really interesting term, that professional home. Can you speak to your experience within the ACH?
Sure, happy to. It is a group of professional home that's a group of like-minded individuals, increasingly diverse. Like historically, 45 plus years ago, when it was founded, it really was a group of physicians committed to communicating better with their patients. It was primary care focused and has really broadened over time, and even especially in my tenure within the organization of about 10 years or so to be hyper interprofessional, whether you're clinical or researcher or a patient advocate, patient experience professional, or a healthcare provider or a nurse. It's a very diverse group of individuals truly committed to the team in healthcare, communicating well with each other, and us all as we interface with patients, communicating better with them. And so I think while we're human and have our own, preferences, biases, places where we're skilled and places where we're less so, our hot buttons, et cetera, in the ACH, I would say it's a community that is truly committed to self-reflection. What am I bringing to the conversation? Where might I be contributing to a friction point or a challenge? And what is the other person's vision, values, and whether that's a patient or a colleague? And how do we find not just a common ground, like not a compromise, though sometimes I suppose that's the best, but actually really partner together and go forward with a shared vision, a shared plan. And I've experienced that through the mentorship I've received in the organization. And I have the honor of continuing to get to pay it forward and invest in others who are in the faculty and training program and in my work on the board. So it's been a place where I feel like I can be called in, not called out, like, oh, you need to do better with this communication, but have skilled, empathic, and partnering communication modeled for me, and have me called in about reflection and what are ways we can amplify what's going well and reflect on what could be even better. So it's a beautiful community of researchers, practitioners, and communication practitioners and colleagues that I am all the better for.
I find it so interesting. And, back to the quote by George Bernard Shaw, you mentioned how this has impacted your professional journey as a leader as much as a clinician. And, when we look at leadership training and leadership development, we're always hearkening back to communication. And a lot of us think we do well, but it still rises as the top issue when there's conflict or problems. I love how you talked about looking inward first and then looking for that shared meaning. And it sounds like there are a lot of just fantastic lessons to be learned there, and that you've brought that into your role professionally. In fact, you won an award for work related to this at the International Conference on Communication in Healthcare in 2023. How did that inform the research study, little pilot study that you've recently done and written an article on?
Oh yeah, and well, I think award is very generous of you. I was recognized in a top 10 group of posters that were people presenting their research, so I am honored by that, and it's
as you should be. That is an award.
Well, thank you. The pilot project that I designed, this was another kind of arm twisting moment. I really had hoped, in partnership with my organization and leaders here, to take a group of providers, so people who are billing and servicing providers, both physicians and APPs, who are just sub-threshold in their patient experience scores, and show that with a discrete intervention that we could dramatically, statistically significantly improve not only their scores, but their own assessment of their communication and their enjoyment and their work. And when I proposed something along those lines, the return ask was, how about you take the bottom decile, like the lowest 10% of patient experience scores, and take that group of providers and invest in them. And my first thought was, based on what I know in the literature, when we are really far off target in any domain of performance, there's probably something bigger going on. And this probably means that there are well-being issues, burnout issues. And so I think that that's probably a lot of the ACH lens that I've incorporated into my thinking of, let's be curious and ask why, rather than say, oh, we have a problem group here. what does it look like to lean into empathy and curiosity and apply that? And so I said, well, we can't just do it. Here's some skills, go employ that, go deploy them. Let's look at a broader intervention set and a kind of a group of resources around self-reflection, leaning into strengths, like a strengths finder assessment of what am I great at? What is my vision for myself? Sets of individual coaching to really dial into values and setting one's own goals in whatever domain of life. And then also communication strategies that are evidence-based from ACH or the workshop. And then at the elbow guidance and implementing those skills and reflecting on how did that go? Like, what were you hoping to do in communicating with that patient, and how can we implement even more still the next time? And so that kind of wraparound set of resources, and that also included some group-based coaching, strengths-based, and kind of building a cohort of support for this intervention group. So that's what I presented on, was the initial outcomes, which were really the participants' vantage point of the set of interventions and how valuable they felt it was, whether they would recommend it to colleagues, how much it drove their pre versus post burnout well-being, and then kind of qualitative reflection on the program. The second set of outcomes, which is pre-publication, we're finalizing the manuscript, is about the patient experience outcomes themselves, and I'll forecast that it was pretty stellar, very, very much statistically significant. So I was given a group that I worried about. I worried about them as humans, and I really honestly had to be encouraged to put the title remediation on it, because I do think that label can be very harming. The title of the paper that we did publish does call it Relational Resources for a Remediation Group. But I think that really thinking about how are these individuals experiencing their work and their life, and what does it look like to partner with them and set goals that they want to set to improve their work and their communication was my approach.
Well, I found the approach fascinating because, as you said, so often with these performance-based outcomes, which physicians and providers are now being reimbursed on as well, it can contribute sometimes to that sense of burnout, because these are high-achieving individuals. They're used to getting the A or working a little bit harder to get that A. And when they get a B, even though that's really good, or with a Press-Ganey scores, a lot of times they're still scoring in 90% positive, but the decile marks are so high and the window is so narrow that they're feeling like a failure even within the space of high achievement. So I love that you said, instead of just throwing some skills training at them, which is what I've seen in a lot of organizations, you leaned into the empathy and curiosity. And part of your program was offering the employee assistance program to all the participants as well. Even though no one took up on that, I thought it was fascinating that it was part of the general mix. And I thought another strength of it was pulling in the community aspect of it, because there was group and individual training. And so what was your biggest takeaway from this experience, and what did you learn from doing this study?
Kristen, while you were summarizing the study and what struck you, a word came to mind, and I feel like it's important to say it, which is shame. We are trained in healthcare, and maybe more in medicine than in health professions, education or nursing education, but maybe not. We are in a shame-based model of training and model of care delivery. And really, this project made me reflect a lot on that. What does it look like to be anti-shaming? What does it look like to center a growth mindset and focus on resources that everyone can benefit from? I say that all the time. These are resources we want to scale and your input, and I meant it. This was not a tagline. Like, these are resources we want to scale because we know everyone can benefit. Your experience and your feedback on the experience is essential to us making this as relevant as possible to your colleagues. And so just trying to think through reading about, shame in medicine is an amazing, I don't know if you're familiar with that podcast or that work out of University of Exeter, but it's stellar. It makes me feel less alone when I feel ashamed by performing less than a superstar on anything. And I think that that thinking about this group and leaning in, like you said, to curiosity and compassion and really letting them drive, like, what do you want to talk about in coaching? It doesn't matter to me what the topic is. This is your time. And I firmly believe that coaching for healthcare providers will reduce burnout. We see that in the literature. It's very well published, at least in physician literature. And so what does it look like to bring these resources that we are actually separately, unrelated to patient experience, but related, scaling up at our organization? What does that look like to try it and say, like, can we see a higher engagement in setting one's own goals around professional life, personal life, and communication and engagement with patients? Will we see a change? And we did.
I think it's incredible and could be the start of something big, for the organization, as you mentioned. There was another area I wanted to question about. The group of the cohort that you had was all female, and a higher percent of minority providers. And I also, we talk about providers are required to learn about unconscious bias so that we're not presenting that in our interactions and our diagnostics and, trying to deliver more equitable healthcare. So we need to be aware of our own biases. But how did you see bias playing into the patient experience scores, and what reflections did you have on that?
Yeah, I would say it was beyond the scope of this article to draw direct connections. So, for example, looking at the demographics of the patients that were filling out the surveys that led to the scores that were the intake scores for this group of providers, I don't have that data. That being said, we know in the literature that when there is non-congruence between the provider and the patient, there is more likely to be bias and lower scores. That's oversimplifying matters, but we know that there's heterogeneity in the literature on whether female providers always are lower scored. Generally, advanced practice providers and physicians, it doesn't seem like there's any significant bias there, but I think that I wonder as an APP sometimes if patients judge more harshly. And then, as you mentioned, people who are underrepresented in healthcare, there can be bias. And so it is heartbreaking to look at a group, and there was of the initial invited group to participate, 12. One was male. And so I don't know that it was statistically significant, the invited group versus our institution as far as male to female providers, participants to overall. But I do think that we cannot change most of our identities. Like, I guess I could go back to medical school, but I identify as female. I am 5'2", I am an APP, and I am racialized as white. And so when there are differences between me and my patient in any of those domains, it can lead to me being biased against the patient being biased against me, or us misunderstanding each other. And I think that's where communication comes in. And this is where I have hope. And so with this group, in the intervention group, and generally when I teach communication, I am explicit that the onus is on us, if we're in a more powerful position as a leader or as a healthcare provider with the person in front of us, to be intentional about bridging the gap, to be intentional about leaning into curiosity and attempting to mitigate, as you were saying, our own implicit biases, to be aware of them. And really it's perspective seeking and curiosity and empathy that must bridge that gap. You know, I, like many humans, make assumptions, and those get me in trouble. And so recognizing, oh, I was making assumption, apology, I misunderstood. Tell me more. I want to understand what your ideas are or what your perspective is on this. Get me out of trouble. And I think those core sets of communication strategies can help us get out of our own biases and our own lenses that we are born with and are raised with, and to be better at doing the work of in healthcare as leaders. And I would say for women, often we are socialized to be more empathetic. Not always, but often that's how we're socialized. And that being said, I think that that we can lean in even more. And I think one thing I have found really encouraging is as I'm teaching communication strategies to people that are more soft-skilled natured, that just enjoy going deeper and learning more about another person or humanistic by nature. It doesn't require that. Actually, empathy, and I can try to find the citation. I don't have it at the top of my fingertips, but empathy has been studied to be a cognitive skill that you can observe for very behaviorally specific indicators that someone is having an emotional or human reaction. And it's a cognitive skill to go, I am seeing these indicators, these data points that this person could use an empathetic response of whatever type. It doesn't have to be attending to emotion. It can be partnership. It can be legitimizing their experience. There's a whole toolkit of ways to respond with compassion and empathy. But that gives me hope that different personality types can benefit from compassionate communication.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. And, then I'm affiliated with the Trust Edge Leadership Institute, and they cite 8 pillars for building trust that are universal across the globe and cultures and ethnicities. And one of those 8 pillars is compassion. We all respond to compassion and to people that care beyond themselves. So, I hear you talking a lot about that and learning to cultivate that skill through active listening, which is more than your ear, right? It's the listening with your eyes and just feeling that energy that person is conveying. So this has been really insightful, and I wondered if you had a couple of key points that you want to leave our viewership with today.
Well, thanks, Kristen, and I've enjoyed our conversation too. I would say that, being deeply engaged and proud of your work starts at home. And we are only going to be able to take as good care of our colleagues and ultimately our patients, and as we take of ourselves. And so it starts here, self-reflection, compassion with our colleagues and partnership with our colleagues will translate to better outcomes for our patients. And then I will echo what you were just saying, that communication is so much more than what we state and what's coming out of our mouth or our body language. It really has to start with active listening and compassionate or empathetic responses. And that's where we get the buy-in. That's where we get the meaning. That's where I leave a colleague-to-colleague conversation or a patient conversation with deeper well-being for myself and engagement for myself, much less the other person.
Yes, thank you for that. And if people are interested in your recent article, I'll just read the title of it: Effective Remediation for Advanced Practice Providers with Lowest Patient Experience, The Power of Relational Resources. How can they find your article?
If you search it, you should be able to at least view on the side of the editorial firewall or the journal firewall the summary. If anyone is very interested in reading the full details, I would be more than happy to share a PDF. Please just connect with me on LinkedIn.
That's great. I appreciate that. And what I'm taking away is something that you said. I love the term perspective seeking, and leaning into the empathy and curiosity. It's a recipe for success for all of us, inside and outside of work. So thank you again for being on the show today. It's truly been a pleasure.
Well, thank you, Kristen. The pleasure is mutual.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of the pod. I invite you to join our pod every month as we empower one another, fostering a world where women in healthcare leadership thrive.